Thank you to BQE, the makers of BQE Core, for their support of this episode. BQE Core is the software that makes it easy to manage your projects and people for maximum productivity and ultimate profitability. Learn more at bqe.com.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, did some people put their foots in their mouths. Wow.
Yeah, foot mouth.
Foot in mouth disease.
All right, so we're talking about this debacle, online debacle, how to be an office, which is like a terrible title.
It is.
How to be in an office. I left a word out.
Exactly.
How to be in an office? Is that a question?
Well, to be quite honest with you, even when you left that off, it's like
kind of the same.
How to be in office? You almost have to ask, do they really know what it's like to be in an office, whether on the corporate level? And I understand that the moderators all are practicing architects, but wow.
2 out of 3. Yeah, I think that so a little bit of background. So there was a live stream event by SCI-Arc. They do this Basecamp series, and the topic of this one was how to be in an office, and it's available on YouTube. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. There's also a great summary article by a Twitter person called The Hustle Architect, which is a pseudonym for something else. Its Twitter name is @VitruviusGrind. And there's also a summary cut video on YouTube, which we'll put a link to, called SCI-Arc Lowlights. They just kind of cut the especially egregious pieces into this video. They didn't leave the egregious pieces out of this video. That's what this video is. It's just the hot takes.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So
it's those ones that you hope the mic was off, but no, I mean, the hot mic was the conversation, and you were just like,
it's wild. This is a wild video. And I think, more than anything, we're not here to maybe pick apart every little piece of this video, but kind of the overarching structural topics and how they relate to the issues in the profession, I think are probably the biggest drivers of this conversation, because this video just points them all out. And I think one thing that, let's just start and say who the 3 people on the panel were. There's Dwayne Oyler of Oyler Wu. There's Marikka Trotter, who works with Tom Wiscombe Architecture. And then there's Margaret Griffin of Griffin Enright Architects. And Margaret was one of my thesis advisors, actually. So I do have a slight connection to this video. I don't remember her being so self-serving when I studied under her.
Wow. Kind of hopeful and possibly glad that you might not have interned with her.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this what's interesting is what they're talking about is not my experience in architecture at all.
No.
So I want to put that out at front, that your experience doesn't have to be, but they absolutely believe that this is how to be in an office.
Right. And what was interesting about it, so I wrote down the thing that came to my mind that just struck a chord, so I had to write down that it was this meat market mentality. And it was this, we've said in the past, in even like past episode and in several episodes, where the way things were is not necessarily how the way things need to be. And it's interesting because I've had this conversation with partners in our firm, other senior associates, project managers, everybody else, and their take on it is there's some similar takes out in the profession where they're just like, well, what's the big deal? I mean, if we ask them to work harder or work longer or, take less pay or whatever, why aren't they just happy that they have a job? And you're like, wait, just because we went through that doesn't mean that it was right and that we should continue to perpetuate that problem. And yet there are quite a handful of people who truly believe that this is the way. This is the way that you earn your chops in the profession. And there was so many things that I took offense to on this very bougie attitude of boutique firms and better design versus corporate offices. And
you've sold out Cormac, obviously, because you big firm equals bad, right?
big firm equals bad. Big, I've sold my soul for the money, which I obviously can't hold the laughter in hard enough. But wow, I mean, I watched the long version as well as the short version. And what I found funny actually is the short version, the lowlights version, was offensive to my sensibilities.
Yeah, because it's just the hits keep on coming, right? Like there's no ups or and down. It's just all down, 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 down.
so it's all down, down,
it's
down.
the
down,
lowlights,
down.
Yeah.
And so when I watched the long version, I listened to them kind of expand upon, because here's the thing. Let's be fair to them, is that, the lowlights version was really just the cliff notes. It was the out of context. It was just the straight, this is what they said. And here's the problem that I had with the long version, is the explanation of what they said wasn't doing them any better. They just kept digging. And in a way, it made them sound so arrogant and so out of touch with the profession, that if that's the way that they conduct business, and if that's the way that they conduct the staff in their office, I don't really honestly know how they keep staff in their office.
Well, they don't. Margaret Griffin herself said she was worried about getting fired every single day. And she has obviously brought this mentality to the practice of architecture today. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have of this, is that there are no solutions here. This is the way it is, and you will have a job and you will like it. Like Dwayne Oyler said, don't go where you're paid the most. You most certainly should not go to where you're paid the most. Hopefully you'll go somewhere where you make a living wage. And basically the theme here is, you'll have a job, you'll do what I say, and you'll like it. And I thought what was so ironic was when Margaret pointed out about going to a big firm like Gensler, which was totally, this should be the worst thing that you could ever choose to do, because then you might have to draw bathrooms for a year, right? And okay, we've definitely talked about that kind of thing on the show before, right? And yes, there are people who get pigeonholed into doing that kind of busy work, right? Absolutely. Should architects still be drawing parking lots today? I don't think so. And yet architects won't adopt technology that'll do this for them. So
Right.
whatever. Right. But I think what is so crazy is some of the stuff that's come out since this live stream in regard to Tom Wiscombe's office, who Marikka Trotter works for and works with also at SCI-Arc. He is one of the professors at SCI-Arc, making a shit ton of money at SCI-Arc. I mean, if you Google SCI-Arc faculty pay on ArcConnect, you can see, because this is all reported information. You can see what these people are making. It's a lot. And one of the things that came out was that, like, you'll go work for Tom Wiscombe for basically, I don't know, they don't say how much. I'm guessing basically nothing, for a couple of reasons, and which we can get into in a minute here. But one of the things that he has the students do is deep clean his office. So it's like, you can go work for Gensler and you can draw the bathrooms, or you could go work for prestigious Atelier Tom Wiscombe and you can actually clean them.
I do have to admit one thing. Never in my life heard of Tom Wiscombe. So I mean, okay, well, LA. So he's a local,
I'll say wannabe Starchitect. Yeah, maybe he is one.
Okay. Well,
not quite the Stark, but definitely on the wants to be on the trajectory of that. And I'm not saying these are even bad people, but it really shows badly.
And apologies for making it sound as if it's just like, I mean, these people who are, I'm just more thinking to myself that the Genslers, the SOMs, the HOKs, the AECOMs, the people like that, what I find interesting about, like, the corporate capitalist, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, firms, to be quite honest with you, you actually do, if you're pursuing commercial architecture as part of your resume building, I can't honestly think of a better firms to work for, only because now, preface all of this by, I've never worked for that large of a firm before. I mean, honestly, our firm is a medium-sized firm. We have 3 offices. It never really feels like a big firm. And at our maximum right now, we're at 180 across 3 firms and a variety of different people scattered throughout as remote employees. And so we're not a big firm, but because we're a corporate firm that has higher education pursuits as our kind of like main staple, we're able to broaden people's experiences and go from different levels of practice to different levels of projects, to big projects, small projects, fit out projects, things like that. So you're getting a broader spectrum of experience. And oh my God, the whole you're going to graduate and you're going to do bathroom details is long since gone. I mean, we make a conscious effort to involve interns, newly graduates, in every aspect of the process. We do know that they're not going to be able to do all of the finite details of things because they've just never experienced it. So it's up to us to be able to shepherd them through all of those. But this, kind of like, you got to pay your dues. You've got to do this particular project. I did a shitter. You're going to do a shitter. That's long since gone.
But the thing is, Cormac, that doesn't even matter because that doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to push in this video, exactly. Which is, you need to come work for our boutique atelier firms for nothing and like it. That's the main message here. It is completely self-serving message that they were putting out in front of students who are paying $51,000 a year to go to school. You should try to get a job that maybe pays a living wage. You should not have work-life balance because, as Tom Oyler said, why would you want to go to work and then go home and have a life? Like, that's no way to live. That sounds like miserable. And basically setting everybody up here with this kind of propaganda narrative of how they run their offices. And that is the way to be in office, the way to be in an office, is to fall in line with this self-serving, slavish mentality of how they run their firms. They don't even know what it's like to work in a big firm. They probably never have. They're definitely not asking what it's like. They have their minds already set on how that's going to fit into the narrative, and it's presented just to push the narrative.
Right.
51 grand a year to then be told that you need to go work for. Okay, I already said that part. I'm not going to say it again. But I think one of the other interesting things that has come out of this. Okay, so step back even further for a minute before I get to that, which is, these problems run so deep. This is something finally scratched the surface and allowed it to be on display on a freaking live stream on YouTube, which is just mind-blowing to me. I'm glad it happened. I just can't believe how unaware the 3 people sitting at this table are about what's happening. That they are speaking into a hot mic that is being broadcast around the world and kept on a YouTube channel for everyone to see forevermore, right? Like, okay, so maybe they really don't understand that. Maybe they do understand that and they're okay with it. I'm not sure why they would be okay with that, but they did it. So I think I just wanted to point that out, that like, these are tired, old guard types, and yes. I don't think they get this at all.
Well, so what came out of this, in what was just this shocking reminder of some of my own experiences, is this live, eat, breathe architecture kind of mentality,
and then side hustle 2, 3, 4 times on the side so that you can actually survive. Yeah.
Exactly. It's, so you're not making enough money in architecture, but still dedicate all of your life and passion to architecture. However, if you want to make money, go be a waitress, go be this, go be that, do these things. And you're just like, well, holy shit, that's just the wrong way of thinking about things, because you literally are perpetuating a
That is the word.
Yeah.
Perpetuating this problem.
Yes. I remember my thesis year. And so when I think everybody knows the story is, after my third year, I ran out of money and I went and I worked for a firm for a while. And what's interesting is in the long version, they were talking about experience between undergraduate and graduate and the value behind that. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, that's actually one thing that I do like about, one of the few things that they were talking about that I could agree with is that you as a architectural professional will increase your value to firms and your own marketability by the level of experience that you have. And so, but whereas I ran out of money and I had to go to work. And so I went and I worked. And so I was lucky enough to land as a hourly employee at an architecture firm, which made a decent enough living for me to be able to save up enough money to get back into school and everything else. But in that interim period where I left school and started working, I met my wife. We ended up getting married as the years went on. As I'm wrapping up my degree, we have our first child. So my priorities shifted. Is that, yes, I need to, do the best that I can in school, but I also need to do the best that I can for my family. And I was basically told by an architectural professor, very much like the three that were sitting on that panel, you need to go ahead and quit school because your perspective has shifted that you don't, live, eat, and breathe architecture, that it is not your number one priority. Your number one priority is split. And so not only did I basically say...
This is the narrative of a lot of academia. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, not only did I basically say, F off, but I did work harder to prove to him that I can have a balance in my life that was priority of family and of my profession, that it wasn't like this, I have to live one life and one life only, that it is about life.
Suffer for your art.
Yeah, exactly. I won't suffer for my art. I mean, I will dedicate myself to my art. I will be the best professional that I can be. I will help propagate a better profession for others, but I'm not going to sacrifice, in contrary to plenty of conversations that we had about some obscene hours that I've been working recently and all of that other stuff aside, I really, truly believe that you can have a life and a profession that are commingled and not just, you're not like sacrificing the art and creativity of the profession by having a life and family and everything else, which was...
But that's just like your opinion, man.
It seemed to be,
that I'm wondering if this kind of toxic narrative that they were spewing live stream on the internet, but also in front of this live audience of hopeful students emerging into the profession was inspiring.
And it was, and then you got into the Q&A and the students were talking about their reality and their answer was, well, you just gotta, you've got to make the sacrifices.
You be you.
Like
you just do you.
Oh yeah, sorry. That was even more disingenuously just infuriating.
Because it's totally disconnected from the reality of these international students who can't get the visa to do the work that she's talking about doing. Like, you just can't even do it. Oh, well, I don't know. That just wasn't my experience. Like, really? No shit, that wasn't your experience. It's so obvious that you can't even speak to this because it's so disconnected from these students' reality. It's insanity that you're up here as a quote unquote leader telling people how to be in an office, telling them that the way that they need to live their life and not have a life and all these things. And then when they actually present a real problem of how to actually accomplish what you're saying that they need to do, and you have zero answers and you just cop out. Say, well, you just do you. I guess if you're not ready and willing to do what I'm advising you to do, then maybe you shouldn't even be in architecture.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up the students, because one other thing I wanted to mention here, which was the point I wanted to get to earlier, and then I derailed myself, which was that the tie-in with Tom Wiscombe Architecture and Marikka Trotter is that they're having students intern in their office under this type of working conditions and situation and pay and all these things, but also controlling the decision-making process of who gets scholarships. And there was evidence that came out that somebody who worked there could not do the things that they were asking them to do or would not do them. And it affected their ability to get a scholarship, which was threatened upon their departure. Well, if you don't do this, then, you might not get a scholarship. And then they didn't, because they're using this as kind of a way to vet who's got it, who has what it takes to dedicate their lives to this in order to get a scholarship. And so they're basically using scholarship money to pay for the students' internships.
Yeah.
It's totally screwed up. That's not the right word, but it's totally screwed up.
Yeah. And I don't know, you're probably closer to it, but I'm sure that the scholarship is their pay.
Basically, that's what I'm saying. Like the ethics behind this are just incredibly out of whack. So Tom and Marikka have been put on leave at SCI-Arc because of that. But that all came out of kind of how this video ended, where the students start asking real questions and getting upset and not getting answers. And then that led to people actually speaking up about what's actually going on in a much deeper level. So, wow, like it's incredible. And I just think like when that was kind of posed to you as a student of like this kind of, self-serving BS about how you need to be in the profession and you need to dedicate your life and suffer for your art and do all these things, which is just perpetuating the problems. All of this narrative there's no solutions. There's no ideas about how to fix this. No, like actually, I want you to come do that for me because now I'm in a position of power, right? That's what the panel is basically doing. And that inspired you to step up and say, like, you're not going to tell me. I just wonder, like, how many students had that feeling walking away from this. I felt like this was a huge downer, and I would not be surprised if these students, I mean, what do you do after you've spent $300K on 5 or 6 years of being in SCI-Arc, right? It's like, do you continue to pursue the profession, or are you like, wow, I have nothing to look forward to? Let's take a quick break to share more about our sponsors. Systems and standard operating procedures. You already know that's how to build a profitable business and find the freedom you want. You need systems and procedures. But you struggle with choosing the systems you need most and how to implement those systems quickly so you can get back to doing what you love most. The Designing Your Business Masterclass series was created by an acclaimed architect and business consultant, Douglas Teager, FAIA, to help fellow architects and engineers run their firms more profitably while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Douglas grew from a solo practitioner to become managing partner of his 30-plus person firm, and then later sold his firm so he can do what he does today, helping architects be more successful at Teager Consulting. On the third Wednesday of every month, Douglas dives deep into an essential topic that will strengthen the profitability of your firm and make it sustainable for growth in the years to come. Register now for the Designing Your Business Masterclass with Douglas Teager at bqe.com/masterclass and start implementing powerful systems for the profitability you need and the freedom you want. Every live masterclass session includes AIA continuing education credit, and when you visit bqe.com/masterclass, you'll have access to the full library of past sessions on demand. The Designing Your Business Masterclass is free, and it's brought to you by our friends at BQE, the makers of BQE Core, the software that makes it easy to manage your projects and people for maximum productivity and ultimate profitability. Register now for the next Designing Your Business Masterclass at bqe.com/masterclass. That's bqe.com/masterclass. And now let's get back to our conversation.
I'm going to say this, and it's somewhat naive in the way that I'm going to say this. So forgive me for anybody who is, a SCI-Arc grad that feels differently, and I would love to learn differently. And I know a SCI-Arc grad that used to work in our office, and I consider a very good, a good friend, and she's an amazing architect. But that aside, the way that they phrased it is just like, oh, you're graduating from SCI-Arc, you will have all the tools to rule the world, kind of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys have a really high opinion of yourselves, because I do know some, and it's mostly they walk around in the whole shit don't stink kind of like mentality, but it's usually like I'm going to call it lesser universities in their opinion, that are like the ones that are covering their butts in like doing the actual work. I mean, they do the fancy little sketches of like, oh, here's my, God, I hate the word atelier when it comes to like, because it seems to have this perception of putting people who work in such a place and a higher, standing than other people. And everybody pays their dues, and everybody works hard to get through architecture school. And I've truly believed that it isn't the school that makes the architect. It is the person who takes that education and makes it their own that really makes it. And I've met so many people of the higher status schools that I can't work with them because they don't work. And I'm generalizing, and I know I'm going to probably get some flack for this and all, and I'm okay with that. But I do feel like, I don't know. I guess I was so put off about the airs that were put on, the arrogance that was put on like just the approach that they take to how much better they were. And I guess, coming from lowly Auburn architecture program, that, I'm just, we're like, we were always like, oh, you come from Alabama. How good can you really be? And then they like see how good we really can be. The experience of working with the lower class architects changes their opinion. But I don't know. I guess that's a chip that I carry on my shoulder.
Well, I mean, I'll just throw in here. I can watch this, and I've been to lectures at SCI-Arc. I've been to Hernan Diaz-Alonso, who's running the show over there, his lecture. I've been to Tom Main lectures over there, and they're interesting. Then I get into like the thing that we went to with your alumni get together in Atlanta, AIA conference, and I watch Citizen Architect. I can tell you those two things leave me in very different places. And we've talked about those on the show before, those places that I get left in, right? Where it's like, what am I doing with my life when I watch this one thing versus this, which is extreme distaste for the perpetuators of the problems of this profession. And I think there's an exclamation point on the end of that sentence in the symbology of the way Margaret Griffin said that she isn't going to be around to deal with these problems. And I think that is also symbolic of how a lot of people who perpetuate the problems in the profession feel as well. Not my problem. I'm going to retire. In her case, she's going to take off in a rocket and go to another planet, right? That was her solution. It's like, I don't know. I'm out of here, man. First rocket out. I'll take it. And remember, with all that money that you're not making to survive, if you can hopefully make a living wage, buy stocks with that. Right? It's just like insult after injury. It's just piling on and on and on. And when you add it all up, I can't imagine how those students felt at the end of this conversation.
The conversation itself left me so disillusioned in, kind of like the state of the profession when you have people like that who are creating young or shaping young minds. But what gave me hope was the pushback after, in the Q&A session, that all of those students truly understand the fallacy behind the statements that they were making, truly understand that, this is not the profession that they were talking about was not the profession that they're getting into. And that gave me some, kind of like joy and hope that there is hope coming out of SCI-Arc in spite of the this arrogance.
I think this is another outcome of these professors being completely disconnected from reality, which is that today's students are hyper connected. When we were students, when these professors were students, that wasn't the case. And they're not aware of how much things have changed in this regard. It's students talk about all of the taboos that we were told we could not talk about when we were in school. They talk about all of them, and it's conversational. It's not like this where it's just dictated from one side, like it's coming from the pulpit, the religion of architecture. It's not
Right,
like that anymore.
right.
I mean, everybody's on all of the social media platforms, and it's interesting. I mean, I want to discuss this topic in further detail some other time, but this whole idea of the pseudonymous kind of narrative that people can do, you see it on Archinect, you see it with Vitruvius Grind on Twitter, and people who have pseudonyms, because then they can say whatever they actually think. Whereas there is still definitely a downside to saying what you think and people knowing who you are. I mean, kudos to the students who actually stood up in that lecture there in person and asked those tough questions and put their reputation as a student on the line. And these professors would like you to think that if you ruin your reputation as a student, you're done for in the profession. That's not the case at all. You can go work for another place and they don't care what happened at the last place. They want to, if you're a superstar, you're going to be a superstar no matter where you go.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I think that like this further disconnection of the reality of what students will do nowadays compared to when we were students, they're completely off the mark because we see it. We see it with cancel culture. We saw it here with students not being afraid to speak up about this the toxicity within the educational environment, within the internship environment, within the professional environment, to say like this is not okay anymore. And I know, like you, I'm glad that they did that too. And this is, to me, I see this SCI-Arc issue, this event, as hopefully a tipping point. This stuff is going on everywhere. It's going on everywhere. And what I know the school hopes this will just go away. I'm hoping it doesn't, because you have to have the tipping point for the whole profession to take notice. And as we kind of talked about in the last episode, you have to have an existential crisis for change to happen. And I hope this is it.
Well, what was great about all of this too, not only were the students, speaking up in front of them and challenging their ideas, but the backlash from the architectural community as a whole was pretty amazing. I mean, there's been numerous articles, numerous podcasts, numerous just discussions around the water cooler about this everywhere, which is amazing that the conversation is happening. And so there's more and more transparency of the way it was versus the way it is versus the way it should be kind of conversation. And we need to, the only way we're going to change and improve and get better is to keep having these conversations and force the conversation. Don't let it go dormant again. It's like, oh, well, let's just sweep this under the rug and pretend it never happened and slap the people who are perpetuating this issue on the hand and then rolling on. No.
The only way to do this is to encourage more conversation about these difficult topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In whether it's just like, okay, well, I think we're done talking about this. Can we move on to the next one? No, we aren't done talking about this. We should never be done talking about this, because unless awesomely the profession changes for the better. But see, this is also a knock on the perception of architects and in general as well, is because people who see that, see this arrogance, see the reason why, we've got such a low influence of overall design impact on, let's just say let's just use the US as an example, but we have got such a low percentage of architectural involvement on the building practice that's going on today. It was a low number when, I was sitting in as a student in a lecture listening to, people come in and they were talking about the percentage of actual architecturally designed buildings in the States. And that number's actually dropped over the course of the 20 years since I've heard, well, actually more than 20 years since I heard that lecture. And the reason why is in the faces of those three architects. Those three architects are what continuously drives a wedge and pushes people away from dealing with architects, is because that's what they think architects and architecture is all about. And that isn't what architects and architecture is about. But if that's the face that people see and that's the conversation that people hear, nobody's going to want to come and work with us. Nobody wants to.
It absolutely is the face. And you can tell because that's what the media covers, the architectural media. Those kinds of projects, those kind of people with those kind of thoughts, with those kind of attitudes. It absolutely is. And it's not, I'm generalizing, right? That it's not 100%, but it is. I mean, I think if there's one thing that we can point at, it's actually some of these lately, Firm of the Year, gold medal winners, Pritzker Prize winners. We're actually starting to see change in that attitude, but it's not happening everywhere at the same time. And the influence that a video like this has toward the negative, as far as turning people off, I think is enormous. And I don't think that they're thinking of it in that way. Maybe they're thinking this is more thinning of the herd by, with this kind of first year, get rid of all the students who don't deserve to be here kind of an attitude. But that's not serving this profession in a positive way whatsoever.
It is such this, oh God, you hit it absolutely on the head with the attitude that they portrayed. It was like, well, if you can't hack this, then you shouldn't be in architecture. And I'm like, that is such a almost boot camp type mentality of the way to like nurture. I mean, it's not a nurture mentality. It's a weed you out. I am going to cause you so much pain that if you can't hack this pain, you can't hack the profession. And we're not saying that this profession isn't a tough profession, in that sometimes you do need a thick skin, and like our conversations about me house hunting and things like that, don't get wedded to certain ideas and stuff like that until it becomes a reality. And so there is there is a toughening up that we need to do, but it comes through experience. It comes through nurturing. It comes through actual, like, seeing everything play out. And it doesn't mean that, let's face it, we're jaded. I mean, the architects are jaded people, and it's because we see kind of like all of the roller coaster ride of the profession, and because of the mentality that we grew up with, which is perpetuated again by those three faces, we didn't know how to deal with the ride any differently than with this almost pessimistic attitude. And what I love about these students pushing that mentality is there is a better way to do this. We may not know what that better way is, but why are you telling us that the only way to do this is to suffer and bleed? That can't be the only way. Please, help us find a better way. And when they're like, well, if you don't think that this is the way, then you don't need to be here.
I think what's really interesting about this whole thing with the profession in general is that the architects who are in the profession don't see the profession itself as a design problem.
Exactly. Oh, exactly.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
But we don't have time for that. I definitely think that there are answers that lie out there, and a lot of people can play a role in the solutions to this, but we have to take the time to actually work on the profession ourselves.
I will say this, and I don't know if it's been your experience or not, but so I've worked for a variety of different firms. I worked for a very small firm that was 5 people. I've worked for medium-sized firms where maybe 100, 150 or so. I've worked for a large firm that felt like a small firm because I worked for a satellite office. I've worked for a variety of different ones. Corporate, if you want to call them corporate. versus ESOPs. And what is interesting about my experience throughout my career is the ESOP itself. In this, it's kind of the nature of being an ESOP and what the benefits of being an ESOP are, is that everybody has a voice. Everybody has a say. It doesn't necessarily always feel like it at, all the time, because there is still a structure, a hierarchy structure. There's a board and everything else. And, there are, different positions within the firm, but everybody can challenge those positions. Everybody can, speak up and say, look, this is my firm too. I have a right to say the direction and the course. And, I have a right to be a part of the conversation because it is my firm as much as it is your firm. And
I think that's more rare than
it is more rare. It is more rare. But what's interesting is, just take, for instance, Air St. Croix. I've, now been working for, now on my 7th year there. And so this is a different experience in being an ESOP. And I've even seen the discourse within our office evolve from us slowly moving out of the corporate structure to then moving into an ESOP structure, then moving into an ESOP structure that's got far more transparency. Now, I'm not going to say it's, perfect right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, my experience with an ESOP was that in my last firm, it was an ESOP in quotes, but it was still run like a normal firm. And it was really just an ESOP so that there were no corporate taxes, is what it really felt like.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about this is that I would say that I came in and it was just a few years out of being a corporate firm. So it was probably still very much, corporately run. As that mindset has started to retire or started to change, different faces have, emerged as leaders. There's still the corporate mindset of like the approach to chasing projects and things like that. But I will definitely say that there is a lot more discourse amongst every level of experience in the profession that is a lot different than, I've experienced in the past. And what I find somewhat refreshing about that, and hope that it continues to grow, continues to develop, and continues to become more and more of the nature of the discourse in the profession, is that back to the students who stood up and asked those questions, they want to take an active role in making it better.
That's the design problem I'm talking about, right? With the profession.
Exactly.
I totally agree with
yes. Yeah. That's where we need to mentor our young. We don't need to mentor them in, doing bathroom details or door schedules and stuff. Yeah, we need to do that too, but we all need to do that. I mean, that's just the nature of pulling together buildings and stuff. But we need to nurture them into speaking up for what's right in the profession, because then it starts to align our values in the profession to being, much, stronger values. It's just,
yeah, I think there is hope for sure. When I saw those, you don't get to see who they are standing up, which is on purpose, right? Like that there's definitely but there's a value in them doing that. And I think we're seeing it in other places too. And to me, this is kind of the silver lining to all this, is that there is a movement happening. The movement that involves people speaking up, that involves people exposing the bad ethics. We also see the things like the New York Times article on shop architects that came out, a few months ago. There's the work that the architecture lobby's doing. There's the work that NOMA's doing. There's the work Architectural Workers United. There's several of them out there. And so there are people working on the profession, and that can be a grassroots effort, but it can also be an organized effort. And I think it's good to see it happening from both ends of the candle, right? In that regard. And I think, this video, to me, it really reinforces that a lot of people, this is the game of survivor. It's just like, they're just trying to outlast this really bad thinking that exists out there and waiting for them to die, right? You've heard it put that way before. I mean, that's not original thought. Like a lot of people have said that over the years. Yeah, but I think that is what's happening on one level. On the other level, there is a level of activism that's happening that's just speaking truth to power, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very guilty of stating that the only way for real change in architecture is that there's a lot of old mentality that needs to die off. The old guard really needs to be purged. And that sounds very
It does, yeah.
harsh and
But I know what you mean.
but it maybe not the person themselves, but that mentality, that constant perpetuating of the same thing over and over and over again. That's what needs to be purged. That's what needs to die off. Is that. And I'm glad that, more and more people are challenging the way things were or the way things are, and really trying to push them into saying that, look, just because this was the way that you've done it for the last 50 years doesn't mean it was right, doesn't mean it was just,
or that it's still appropriate. Yeah.
or that it's still appropriate. And so, when we say it's time to move on, it really means it's time to move on.
So it's time to move on.
So it's time to move on.
Thank you to BQE, the makers of BQE Core, for their support of this podcast episode. Visit bqe.com/masterclass to register for the next Designing Your Business Masterclass. Thanks for listening. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. See all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what we're doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and don't forget to share it with your friends. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can find our entire catalog of shows. Talk to you soon.